Okay, this is part 75 of Nos4a2. Route 3, New Hampshire. The road had a clean smell of evergreens, of water, of woods. Vic thought there would be sirens, but when she looked in the left-hand mirror, she saw only a half-mile of empty asphalt, and there was no sound at all but the controlled roar of the Triumph. A passenger's jet slid through the sky 24,000 feet above her. A brilliant spoke of light headed west. At the next turn, she left the lake road and swung into the green hills mounded over Winnipesaukee, headed west herself. She didn't know how to get to the next part, didn't know how to make it work, and thought she had very little time to figure it out. She had found her way to the bridge the day before, but that seemed a fantastically long time ago, almost as long as childhood. Now it seemed too sunny and bright for something impossible to happen. The clarity of the day insisted on a world that made sense, that operated by known laws. Around every bend there was only more road, the black top looking fresh and rich in the sunshine. Vic followed the switchbacks, climbing steadily into the hills away from the lake. Her hands were slippery on the handlebars, and her foot hurt from pushing the sticky shift through the gears. She went faster and then faster still, as if she could tear that hole in the world by speed alone. She blew through a town that was little more than a yellow caution light hanging over a four-way intersection. Vic meant to run the bike until it was out of gas, and then she might drop it, leave the Triumph in the dust, and start running, right down the center of the road, running until the fucking shorter way bridge appeared for her or her legs gave out. Only it wasn't going to appear because there was no bridge. The only place the shorter way existed was in her mind. With every mile, this fact became clearer to her. It was what her psychiatrist had always insisted it was, an escape hatch that she leaped through when she couldn't handle reality, the comforting empowerment fantasy of a violently depressed woman with a history of trauma. She went faster, taking the curves at almost 60. She was going so fast it was possible to pretend the water streaming from her eyes was a reaction to the wind blowing in her face. The Triumph began to climb again, hugging the inside of a hill. On a curve near the crest, a police cruiser blasted past going the other way. She was close to the double line and felt the slipstream snatch at her, giving her a brief dangerous moment of wobble. For an instant the driver was just an arm's length away. His window was down, his elbow hanging out, a dude with two chins and a toothpick in the corner of his mouth. She was so close she could have snatched the toothpick from between his lips. In the next moment he was gone and she was over the hill. He had probably been gunning it for that four-way intersection with the yellow caution light, looking to cut her off there. He would have to follow the winding road he was on all the way into town before he could turn and come back after her. She had maybe a full minute on him. The bike swung through a high, tight curve, and she had a glimpse of Paugus Bay below, dark blue and cold. She wondered where she would be locked up when she would next see the water. She had spent so much of her adult life in institutions, eating institutional food, living by institutional rules. Lights out at 8:30, pills in a paper cup, water that tasted like rust, like old pipes, stainless steel toilet seats, and the only time you saw blue water was when you flushed. The road rose and dropped in a little dip, and in the hollow there was a country store on the left. It was a two-story place made out of peeled logs with a white plastic sign over the door that said North Country Video. Stores still rented videos out here, not just DVDs but videotapes too. Vic was almost past the place where she decided to swing into the dirt lot and hide. The parking area extended around back, and it was dark there beneath the pines. She stood on the rear brake, already going into her turn, when she remembered there was no rear brake. She grabbed the front brake. For the first time it occurred to her that it might not be working either. It was. The front brake grabbed hard, and she almost went over the handlebars. The rear tire whined shrilly across the blacktop, painting a black rubber streak. She was still sliding when she hit the dirt lot. The tires tore at the earth, raised clouds of brown smoke. The Triumph jackhammered another 12 feet past North Country Video, crunching to a stop at last in the back of the lot. A nighttime darkness waited beneath the evergreens. Behind the building, a loop of sagging chain bared across to a footpath, a dusty trench carved through weeds and ferns. A dirt bike run, maybe, or out-of-use hiking trail. She had not spied it from the road. No one would, set back as it was in the shadows. She didn't hear the cop car until it was very close, her ears full of the sound of her own ragged breath and overworked heart. The cruiser shrieked past, the undercarriage crashing as it skipped over the frost heaves. She saw a flicker of movement at the edge of her vision. She looked up at a plate glass window half pasted over with posters advertising the Powerball. A fat girl with a nose ring was staring out at her, her eyes wide with alarm. She had a phone to her ear and her mouth was opening and closing. Vic looked at the footpath on the other side of that chain. The narrow rut was drifted with pine needles. It pointed steeply downhill. She tried to think what was down there. Route 11, most likely. If the path didn't lead to the highway, she could at least follow it until it petered out, then park the bike in the pines. It would be peaceful among the trees, a good place to sit and wait for the police. She shifted into neutral and walked it around the chain. Then she put her feet on the pegs and let gravity do the rest. Vic rode through a felty darkness that smelled sweetly of firs, of Christmas, a thought that made her shiver. It reminded her of Haverhill, of the town woods, and of the slope behind the house where she had grown up. The tires bumped over roots and rocks, and the bike shimmied across the uncertain ground. It took great concentration to guide the motorcycle along the narrow rut. She stood on the pegs to watch the front tire. She had to stop thinking, had to go empty, couldn't spare any room inside her head for the police or Lou or Mannix or even Wayne. She could not try to work things out now. She had to focus instead on staying balanced. It was, anyway, difficult to remain frantic in the piney gloom, with the light slanting down through the boughs and an atlas of white cloud inscribed on the sky above. The small of her back was stiff and tight, but the pain was sweet, made her aware of her own body working in concert with the bike. A wind rushed in the tops of the pines with a gentle roar like a river in flood. She wished she had a chance to take Wayne on the motorcycle. If she hadn't been able to show him these woods with their sprawling carpet of rusty pine needles beneath the sky lit up with the first best light of July, she thought it would have been a memory for both of them to hold on to for the rest of their lives. What a thing it would be to ride through the scented shadows with Wayne clutching her tight, to follow a dirt path until they found a peaceful place to stop, to stare out at a homemade lunch and some bottles of soda, to doze off together by the bike in this ancient house of sleep with its floor of mossy earth and its high ceiling of crisscrossing boughs. When she closed her eyes, she could almost feel Wayne's arms around her waist. But she only dared close her eyes for a moment. She breathed out and looked up, and in that moment the motorcycle arrived at the bottom of the slope and crossed 20 feet of flat ground to the covered bridge.